The gospel lesson this morning is from the Gospel of Luke. We're in chapter 11, verses 5 through 13. And then Jesus said to them, "Suppose you have a friend, and you go to him at midnight and say, 'Friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread. A friend of mine on a journey has come to me, and I have no food to offer him.' And suppose the one inside answers, 'Don't bother me. The door is already locked, and my children and I are in bed. I can't get up and give you anything.' I tell you, even though he will not get up and give you the bread because of friendship, yet because of your shameless audacity, he will surely get up and give you as much as you need. And so I say to you, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. Which of you fathers, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake instead? Or if he asks for an egg, will give him a scorpion? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him?" This is the reading of the word of our Lord. You may be seated.
You have everything, right?
Yeah, Dad, I got everything. I got the stove, the sleeping bag, the linens, the matches, and the cooler.
Clean underwear?
Yeah, when Jenny packed the girls' bags, I'm sure she packed the girls' clean underwear.
No, I mean for you.
Yeah, it's in here somewhere.
Because if you forgot, you
Dad,
know,
I didn't forget them.
if not, you just flip them inside out. You'll be fine. Hey, now remember, the s'mores. You want to make sure you get the chocolate.
I know, Dad. I need to melt the chocolate before I add the marshmallows. That way it all melts smoothly.
Yeah. Taking both girls camping. I can't even imagine what that would be like. I mean, it was one thing taking you and your brothers, but girls. Wow, that's a whole different ball game.
I can do it.
No doubt. No doubt. Hey, son,
Yeah.
listen to me. Have a great weekend. Make some good memories with those fine girls of yours. It's a privilege being a dad. You get to show them God's big old world, probably some stuff they've never seen this weekend. Just remind them who made it. Have fun with them. Laugh a lot. You were always such a serious little guy. Hey, I love you, boy.
I love you too.
Who are you talking to?
Nobody.
Hey!
Are you ready for this?
I'm really ready.
All right.
You're really gonna do this, aren't you? Why don't you just take her to the mall? Maybe ride a carousel, watch a movie.
I got this. Trust me.
At least let me take this one.
Are you kidding me? She looks like me and has your personality. She's the life of the party. Why would I do that?
Did you pack clean underwear?
Why does everybody keep asking me about that?
Here's your dye panties.
It's called underwear.
Why don't you let me go with you?
No, 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 no.
I think your dad would be proud of you. Even though there are much easier ways to celebrate Father's Day.
Maybe. But you know what? It's what we do. Me and my dad. It's our thing.
I know.
You know, we have an opportunity as fathers to leave a legacy. And sometimes the legacy thing that we think about isn't maybe what God has in mind for us, and it's maybe not what the world needs from us. A lot of times we think leaving a legacy is, giving a bunch of money that goes to build a big building, and then, it's the Chris Dare Center for the Arts, because that's going to outlast me. And what you don't know is after you're gone, it doesn't take very long before somebody with bigger pockets comes along, and the name of the building gets changed, or they decide to tear it down and build something bigger. A building isn't a lasting legacy. I want you to know that. I titled this, Be a Dad to Someone. We have an opportunity as men to influence the lives of others, particularly young men. And young men are constantly looking for role models. Did you know that? It's a crisis in our society that there are not men to look up to. Oh, they may look up to a rock star, they may look up to a football quarterback, but they don't have anyone that directly influences their life for the better in a positive way. And yet, we have an opportunity, men, to do that. By the way, ladies, you can listen in to this message if you'd like. And honestly, most of it applies to you too. It really does. We have an opportunity to influence young men, boys, and young ladies as well in positive ways. When I was at one of my previous churches, we had a program called Kids Hope. And Kids Hope was an interesting program where we spent 1 hour a week at the school with, in my case, a young boy. These are elementary age children. And we could do whatever we wanted during that hour. The most important thing that we did in that program was show up at the same time on the same day every week, week after week after week. One of the questions that we always got from the children is, how many other kids do you visit with? I only visit with you. Just you. That's it. We can do that with grandchildren. We can do that with neighborhood children. We can do that with any kind of child. They need us very badly. When I was 11 years old, I got my first paper route, and I delivered the paper every day. But on Friday nights, every Friday night was spent collecting. I don't know if any of you remember any of this, but I had to pay for my papers every week. And I paid the full price for all these papers. And I went around and I knocked on every door that I delivered a newspaper to. And I think they paid $1.20 a week or something like that for 7 editions of the newspaper. And I had to collect that money, and if I couldn't collect it, I had to pay anyway for my newspapers. I remember going around collecting one Friday night, and the garage door was open on the garage of the house that I went to, and there was a gentleman in there, and he was rebuilding the engine in his truck. He had the valve covers off, And he had just finished putting all the push rods in and the rocker arms and everything. And I had never seen under a valve cover before. I was fascinated by well, come in, he said. Let me show you. He cranked the engine over and squirted oil all over the place just to demonstrate, that all the push rods had oil coming up through them the way they were supposed to. It was fascinating, and I learned a lot. And the interesting thing is, I have completely down to the crankshaft rebuilt a couple of engines in my life. And part of the reason that I could do that was because of this man just showing me, just taking a few minutes of his time to show me and to influence me. When I was in the Air Force, there was a mechanic that worked on our airplanes there. I was a member of the Aero Club, and that's how I got my pilot's license when I was serving in Germany. It was time for me to re-up, right? To re-enlist if I wanted to serve another 4 years. And I had been offered $1,000, they would give me if I re-enlisted. $1,000. I never saw $1,000 in my life. $1,000 was a huge incentive. And so we're working in the hangar one night, and he's showing me, we had pulled the jug, one of the cylinders off of the engine on this Cessna 150, and he was showing me how to check it, that it was round and that it wasn't scored, and to replace the rings and put it back in. And while we're doing all of this stuff, I'm talking to him. I said, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should re-up or not. And they're offering me $1,000 and a choice of assignment and all these things. And he's looked at me and he said, beg, borrow, or steal from your grandmother, but get out of here and go to college. He said, you have no business being here. Now, this was a crusty old guy, cigar hanging out, a good 8 days of growth probably on his chin. I don't remember his name. But I remember the words that he spoke to me, And I got out. And before I got out, I was already enrolled at Purdue, and I went to school on the GI Bill. And I've done a lot more school since then. He influenced me. You can't believe just a few minutes with somebody, just a few words with somebody, just a little bit of wisdom with somebody. We do not have to be the biological father to be a dad to someone. Ephesians 5:28, in this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. One of the things I never doubted about my dad was his love for my mother. Now, you may not recognize what an incredible influence that is on you as a child growing up in a household. But to see that your dad loves your mom, it gives you a kind of stability, doesn't it? It gives you this certainty about your future, and you get to be a part of a home that you don't have to worry about those things. My biggest worry growing up was if, Jennifer liked me or not, that kind of stuff. And that's what a kid should be worrying about. That's what I had to worry about. In their relationship, I saw sacrifice. And I recognized that a good relationship takes sacrifice because I saw that. I also saw the reward that came out of that sacrifice. It was demonstrated to me. Most of the influence I had from my dad wasn't in words. It was in example. He set an example for me. Psalm 127:3, children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. One of the other things that I never doubted about my dad was his love for me. Yeah. When I was a young boy, we had nights up. Have you ever heard of nights up? I don't know if it was an invention in my family or if it was something that other families did, but I'm trying to remember. There were four of us, 4 kids in the family, and it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We had nights up, and my night up might have been Tuesday night, and I got to stay up a half an hour longer than all the other kids. And during that time, it was one-on-one, me and my dad or my mom, but usually my dad. We built a crystal radio. It was very cool, you know. We built a balsa wood airplane. We just did things. Sometimes we just watched a program on television or played a game, but it was my time with Dad alone. My dad used to take us fishing. He would rent 2 boats. He had 2 motors in the back. Can you imagine 6 people, all crowded in the station wagon, all these cane poles hanging out the window? We're headed to the lake on a Saturday. We rent 2 boats, put a motor on the back of each one. We were sophisticated. We had walkie-talkies, so we could talk between the 2 boats. My mom would always have the picnic basket, and we would rendezvous at lunchtime and tie the 2 boats together and sit there and eat our sandwiches and our Kool-Aid. There was always Kool-Aid for some reason. Yeah. I did projects with my dad, things like pulling wires through conduits, and he taught me how to do that. It's not obvious sometimes. Proverbs 1:5, let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. My dad taught me a lot of things. My dad would be up in the attic somewhere, and he'd say, because my legs were younger, run down to the trunk of the car and get me this tool, he would say. And I had no idea what that tool was. And so my dad would pull his pencil out of his pocket and make a drawing of the tool on the rafter somewhere. If you went into that house that they lived in for 53 years, you're going to find little drawings all over the rafters and everywhere of tools, and he would show me what that tool looked like, and I would learn the name of it, and I'd go down to the toolbox and find it for him and bring it up. My dad doesn't know it, but he taught me geometry. When we built part of the house, the addition on it, he went out in the backyard and he laid out all the rafters, for it, figured all the angles that he had to cut everything with it laying out there. I remember him telling me, now this is the way I do it, but this can be done with math, he said. I just don't know how to do that. And then I learned how to do that. 1 Timothy 5:8, anyone who does not provide for their relatives and especially for their own household has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. One of the things that my dad did my entire life growing up until he retired was he would get up every morning and he would go to work. Doesn't seem like a big deal, right? But day in and day out, week after week, year after year, my dad got up in the morning and he went to work. Throughout my career, no matter what I was doing, when I went to the church, I was going to work. I learned that this was such an important ethic. I couldn't even change the language that came around it. I couldn't go to the church. I went to work. The clothes that I wore during the week when I went to work at the church were my work clothes, because Dad always had work clothes. Of course, he was an electrician. He worked in construction. His work clothes looked a little different than mine, but they were still my work clothes. In fact, to this day, Rhonda says, "Do you want work clothes today?" Another thing my dad did that he didn't talk about, but it taught me an important lesson, was whenever he got paid, he sat down at the dining room table and he got out the checkbook and he laid all the bills out and he wrote the checks and he put the stamps on the envelopes and he mailed the bills. I watched my dad do that every week. He paid the bills. It was absolutely as consistent as it could have possibly been. He paid the bills, and you know what? I pay my bills. Always have. It's what I grew up seeing. You pay the bills. It's what you do. 1 Chronicles 16:11, look to the Lord in his strength and seek his face always. Now, my folks taught me something that I'll bet they didn't even know they taught me, but they taught me to pray. Yeah, they taught me to pray. They didn't talk about prayer at all. They didn't waggle their finger at me and say, "Chris, you need to pray. You know, this is a really important thing." Instead, when it was bedtime, we prayed together. When it was mealtime, we held hands and we prayed together. In fact, my mother was very insistent that we had breakfast as a family, and it was a different child's responsibility to get the table set every morning. And we sat at the table and ate breakfast together. Lunch was different. We were all gone doing whatever. But dinner time, we ate dinner together and we prayed together. If we were tied up with two boats together and about to have our sandwiches, what do you suppose we did? We prayed. Yeah, you had to reach from one boat to the other in order to get all those hands connected. But we did it. We prayed. My parents taught me to pray. Proverbs 22:6, start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. My dad took me to church. Yeah. He took me to church. He took me to church most every Sunday. But he also made sure that I got to church when there were youth meetings or any other activities. When I was a freshman in high school, I got to join the chancel choir. I was a big boy then. I got to sing in the chancel choir. And every Wednesday night, I think it was, my dad took me to choir practice. And I sat next to my dad for the first semester or so. When I found out I wasn't a bass, then I moved over to the tenor section. But, yeah, I sang with my dad. It was a gift from my dad. Just to be able to sing with him and have those memories. My dad passed on some of his passions to me. He was an artist. In fact, in our living room, there was always a big painting, watercolor painting or chalk. He worked in chalk a lot, but he would make these huge, beautiful paintings or artworks, and that was always, there was one of his artworks standing in our living room as I grew up. My dad was a musician. He was a singer. And his singing was so important to him. You'd see him sitting in his chair, and he would have his choir folder out before choir practice. He'd have to go through every song, make sure he had rehearsed it all on his own, at least in his head, even if I didn't hear his voice. by these influences, by this passion that my dad passed on. I found to this day I like hanging out with creative people, you know. I like engineers because they're creative people. I like musicians. I like artists. It's just fun hanging out with creative people. My dad took me on trips, lots of trips. One year, my mom and dad schemed together and decided that they were going to do a 5-week trip to the West Coast. And so my dad talked to his employer and he asked for the time off, and his boss said, no, you're not getting 5 weeks off to go on a vacation. So my dad quit his job. We went on a 5-week vacation, which was amazing, and I still have marvelous memories of all the things we saw headed to the West Coast and back. And when we got back, my dad called his boss, and he started work the next day. I don't know if that's faith or just bravery. I'm not sure what that is, but my dad definitely taught me that family is more important than work. More important than work. My dad was committed to Christ and the church. He served on trustees, and we were constantly going to the church to repair things or install new things. He took the job of writing out the birthday and anniversary cards to the whole congregation. And I would see my dad seated at the table, and he would have all the boxes of various cards and the list of addresses and everything, and he would write the cards, and he would address the envelopes, and he'd put the stamp on it every week. That's something. My mom and dad, they went to their Bible study every week. They served, and they taught me to serve. So, leave a legacy, men, and it won't necessarily be a building. It'll be a lesson that's passed down from generation to generation to generation. Because when you do these things for your children, what do you suppose they're going to do? And when they do those things for their children, what do you suppose their children are going to do? You can pass down dysfunction generation after generation if you want to, or you can pass down function. High levels of function from generation to generation. And gentlemen, I believe that that's what we're called to do. So, be a dad to someone. God bless.